Yeah. So welcome everyone who is here today in the room and both over at Zoom. So we are here today to raise some awareness around neurodiversity in specifically in communication, relationship, academia, and life. So what is this? Click here. So what is neurodiversity? Let's start from there. It's a concept that recognizes the natural variation in neurological differences among individuals. So simply put, we can think of it as being outside the category of people who are considered cognitive normal. So being neurodivergent means really having a different neurological profile that may impact cognitive processes, sensory processing, social interaction, communication, or other aspects of functioning. And in our everyday life, we may encounter this at different levels or degree in conditions such as autism, perhaps ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, or bipolar disorder, and many, many more. But what is normal really, and how broadly can we extend this concept of neurodiversity? Perhaps it is more helpful to ask ourselves, what neurodiverse traits do I have in general, or in particular in this group of people? Maybe they present differently when I am at work or when I am at home, in my different circles of social life. And if we take the perspective of one individual, namely ourselves then, and compare it to all others, then we start to realize that there are many ways in which our own brain functions differently compared to all other brains that we encounter in our life. And it can also be through traits, such as perhaps we are more intro or extroverted, or if we are more neurotic, or we were more stable, or our level of agreeableness and antagonist. Perhaps we are very efficient and organized, or we have an openness to new experience, or perhaps we are a highly sensitive person. And then there are also all these other personality types, which there are many, many different tests. And all of this we do in the attempt to define who am I in relation to others. For example, I can make, for me personally, I identify as being a highly sensitive person, and I experience heightened sensitivity to external stimuli and emotional experiences. So I easily get like overwhelmed, and interactions with others might sometimes feel like an emotional roller coaster that others people's feelings might actually feel like I'm feeling them myself. And doing this type of work with coaching and thought work has helped me so much in shifting into from the perspective of riding along this emotional roller coaster to being the person who actually observes the roller coaster chugging along. Yes.
Yeah, and I wanted to share as well some of my things. So I'm never considered myself super neurodivergent type of person, but when I was doing this presentation, I also realized that I have some tendencies that are, I don't think in majority of people, I feel quite a lot of anxiousness, and I think that's exhibits also different ways. Sometimes I want to complain a lot and do things in that way, or I might also become more isolated. And in those places, the response varies. And yeah, I have somehow learned how to control these feelings, but it's not always easy, and you just have to take the time for yourself to see how it goes. And to answer the question here, yeah, let's start taking one more step inside, and how aware am I regarding my own inner workings? So if you were in our last seminar, you have probably seen this central dogma of coaching. So we have our thoughts that are like in relationship with our other thoughts. these thoughts are in relation to our emotions, and those affect our actions, and on the backwards as well. Our actions affect to our emotions, and these emotions affect to our thought processes. And there is this division of them, like you should have this judgment-free space where anything is acknowledged, allowed, and then you have the value space where you need to consider the ethics and the moral values, and there should be a division between them. Not all your thoughts should be translated into actions, and yeah. And this is important when you have interactions with people, that you have your own thoughts and emotions, and which are then linked to your actions. So how does my awareness then shift when communicating with people? How does the thoughts and feelings change when you communicate with people?
Yes, so to explore this a little bit, we're going to use something that is called an intuition pump. And that is just like a story or metaphor that is used to induce an aha moment. And it is designed specifically for people working in research or science. So when we study a biological system, we perform an hypothesis, and then we apply some tools and protocols, and we measure the results. And if the results that we record are not in line with our hypothesis, what do we do then? We ask, well, was my hypothesis wrong? Or did my tools and protocol not elicit the desired effect? And why is that? Why not? Do we ever say, my hypothesis is right, the biological system is wrong? We don't do that as scientists because that would be very unscientific. But what if the biological system is another person, another brain that thinks, feels, and works in a completely different way compared to ourselves? And if we are not going into this interaction with awareness of this, we form our hypothesis about the other based on how our own system is working. And then we perform the interaction. And when our hypothesis, like our expectations, do not produce the desired result, we have a tendency to become very unscientific about this. We are more likely to claim that the other biological system is wrong than that our hypothesis is wrong. And this intuition pump is then used to raise awareness in how we work when we are in default mode, and highlights that awareness itself, it's something that we need to actively bring into our interactions with other people. And our hope is that we start to more often pause and reflect in our interactions with others and ask ourselves, what are my assumptions really based on here? And know that when something is challenging our hypothesis or expectations, for example, when we feel irritated, uncomfortable, maybe annoyed, or even angry, that these emotions are actually signals of information, and that they contain highly valuable information that we can use for the possibility of improving our lives and well-being going forward. And we will dive deeper into this. Let's see.
Okay, so to look into neurodiversity in communication, there was one study published last year, or no, this year, sorry, about where the researchers looked at the conceptual similarity ratings and feature judgments from a variety of words. So basically, what did they do was that they asked people, what is more similar to a finch, like a small bird, whale, or a penguin? And yeah. And then they ask also how many people out of 100 would agree with you. So they ask the perception, how many percentage basically you think that is thinking the same way as you are. What did they saw was that consistently people tend to believe that 2/3 are thinking the same way as you are. This is just to show that the true proportion, it might vary, but you still consider that more majority of people thinks the same way as you are. And how then we can relate this to neurodiversity in ourselves and others? What some practical steps we can take and skills that we can use in order to understand the other people and be aware of these kind of differences. So I think most of us can agree that our intentions and perspective really makes a difference. So if you are expecting a life to be a guided tour, you expect that there will be a customer service where you can file complaints. And this is kind of gives away the power to create the change you want. And yeah, but if you, in addition to expect that the life will be an adventure, you have a different attitude, not a guided tour, then you will become more solution oriented towards the helpful change. And this will allow us to give ourselves the power of change and become the change we want to see in our lives.
Yeah. And through CSI, we have some core values that we always consider when we create things. And building on these core values, we will now showcase some tools and skills of how to approach neurodiversity in communications, relationships, academia, and lives. And these are some examples, and they are not all encompassing, but just pointers towards a direction. And so central to coaching, first of all, is asking ourselves questions and that offer us new perspective. And questions are wonderful tools. And posing effective questions is also an important skill to practice. So let's practice some today. If we use the value of cultivating awareness, we can ask ourselves, how am I different? And am I aware what my mental and social challenges are? We can also utilize radical acceptance. Have I truly accepted my differences? Or am I trying to reject innate qualities and traits that define who I am? Having a beginner's mindset, can I be curious about my differences without applying judgment, guilt, or shame to myself? Showing myself compassion. How can I be kinder to myself in regards to my differences? How can I help myself and make things easier for myself? Awareness. And how are the difficult persons in my life different from me? And in what situations are there patterns? Can I predict when difficulties may arise? Perhaps am I the difficult person in someone else's life? And the answer to that is probably yes. Acceptance. Have I accepted the reality of these difficulties between me and others? Or do I try to deny the reality that something is continuously difficult? Does it feel like I've encountered this specific theme or pattern of difficulty before with this personal situation? Why are some people more difficult to interact with? Learning or leaving all thoughts of should, could, or if only to the side for a moment. Can I get curious about this? Curious about the other person's feelings, fears, motivation, goals, and priorities. And again, compassion. How do I prepare and facilitate self-care before and after such situations or interactions? How can I help myself and take care of myself? What are my specific needs? In what circumstances do I feel irritated, sad, or angry? And as mentioned a bit earlier, that emotions are great indicators of where wisdom and learning experiences are hiding. These can be viewed actually as gift puzzles. And when we figure them out and solve them somehow, our everyday well-being can be improved. Have I accepted my experiences of these feelings, and in what situations do they occur? Or do I try to continuously to move away from such feelings of discomfort? And then I will missing the patterns of learning opportunities. But then we don't need to worry, because such feelings, they will always come back to visit us again in similar situations. And then we'll have another opportunity. How would I approach an interactions without expectations and preconceptions? Can I release and let go of old thinking pattern that doesn't serve me anymore? This is a very simple concept. It is also very difficult to do. And it's also very highly effective. Just noticing and letting go of things that doesn't serve me anymore. When things go wrong, because it's life, it will. How do I show myself compassion, and what did I learn? And I want to emphasize that self-compassion it's not a weakness. It's a wonderful skill to build resilience within ourselves. And also here we can adopt the growth mindset, and we can help ourselves to shift it from the perspective that I failed into the perspective, okay, this was a learning experience and it was a bit uncomfortable, but I learned some things here. And we are ultimately a species coming out of evolution, and learning such new skills, it's simply a way to allow further mental and psychological evolution to take place within ourselves. And yes. So for everything we have talked about today up until now, emotional awareness and regulation is really key. And the hand model of the brain, conceptualized by clinical professor in psychiatry, Daniel Siegel, is a widely used concept to explain the link between our biology and also the experience that we have on an emotional, of our emotional regulation. And it goes like this. Here we have our hand, and the brainstem can then be represented by our wrist, which is responsible for basic and automatic functions such as breathing and keeping our heart pumping. And then we have our thumb here, representing the amygdala. And this is a part in the middle of our brain, which is involved in our emotional responses through fear, anxiety, and aggression, for example. And then wrapped around this part of our brain, represented by our fingers, we have our prefrontal cortex. And this part of the brain helps us with complex decisions and managing our emotions. So what happens then when we experience fear, danger, or very intense emotions? Well, our prefrontal cortex sort of goes offline, and we become very reactive. And in this situation, it is then very difficult to make thoughtful decisions and to be aware of the long-term consequences of our actions, because we simply temporarily lose access to that biological function within us. And what we can do is then to practice becoming aware of the situation and emotional cues within ourselves for when our prefrontal cortex is about to go offline. For example, if you have children, you know, when they start to get annoying, you feel like, oh, maybe I should take a break here. So by accepting then our biology, and then practicing to noticing when, okay, this is my biology starting to present itself, I'm starting to get irritated, the anger is coming on, we can choose then to provide for our needs in helpful ways by pausing and taking a breath and acknowledging that this is happening right now, this is my current emotional state and my mental state. And it can be as simple as just if someone is pressing you for an answer, just take a breath, and I need to think some more about this before I decide. It doesn't have to be very complex. So.
Yes. Then we wanted to give also some guide or help how to deal with difficult interactions and how guide yourself through these interactions. So yeah, there are several things that you can do. So before interaction, we have to accept that you can never change another person. They will have always their feelings and always their emotions and thoughts, and you cannot change that. But you can change only and the only thing that can come from this is that the change can only come through yourself, not through somebody else. And you have to, however, you have to be aware of some things. So if you have expectations, what are these expectations, how to deal with them, and what are these expectations helpful in these situations, and this kind of reflection. You need to be thinking, what is the purpose of all this, and the goal of this interaction? What things, is it to make a lifelong friendship, or improve a project, or a professional goal, or something else? You also need to set what is the highest priority of you, and practice noticing when you get emotionally triggered, and see how your focus will shift away from the priority, and then acknowledge that and try to move back to the what is the focus. And yeah, then you should also set limits to protect your well-being. Consider how often and how long you need to have these kind of interactions that are they absolutely necessary for you to interact with this specific person. And yeah, how do you achieve the goals and priority without or like acknowledging that this person exists as well. During the interaction, you can see where do I need to set the boundaries, and learn from and note what hurts you. So others are allowed to have their opinions, and you cannot do anything about it, and that you have to this doesn't tell anything about you as a person. So for example, if somebody says something bad about you, you will feel sad, stressed, or humiliated, and then you will eventually start to feel worthless and bad, but you have to set the boundary that this is only a thought, not truth. And there is also this nonviolent communication, which is very important, to use these key aspects of observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So for example, there is several ways how you can say things. So for example, if you say, that is not what I said, it's a very reactive way to express yourself. But what you can say instead is that I hear you, your concern, and I feel hurt by this implication. Similarly, you were wrong, very reactive. And then you can change it to, because I observed this, I think that might be incorrect. I'm not lazy. Change it to, when I feel exhausted, I need more time. No, not now. I'm pressed for time. Can we reschedule? So there is several ways how you can, during the interaction, use this nonviolent communication, makes the interaction easier. So after the interaction, what you could do after that? You have to accept that if you have this kind of very, very difficult interaction, that it happened, and some of it hurt. I mean, didn't make you feel good, but you cannot do anything about it. That you feel some denial and you wished for a different outcome. That the other person might never change or understand. I mean, that is unfortunately that you just have to accept that everyone has their own opinions and thoughts. And that this interaction was emotionally difficult for you. And in these situations, it is very important to have self-care, and but there are also some things that you need to be aware of. So what needs of mine are not met in the interaction, and can I meet my needs by myself and my current support network? But here is also important to be aware that how can I grow, help myself better next time. So it is still important to remember that after venting with you should have this kind of social support network, like friends or family or something else that are capable of listening and validating your experiences. You have to remember that after this kind of venting, there is a risk for your ego to start constructing a victim identity, and it's good to be aware of that as well. This is when you judge the others as wrong and ourselves as a victim. And it's a normal system. And if you look at children, they always blame on each other, not ever themselves. But as an adult, you should be capable of realizing this. And although it might seem to or feel good at the time not to or it feels good to be the victim, it's not for long term. Probably it won't serve the goal, or it won't do any good. Instead, you should consider these things that Linda was talking about earlier, like cultivating awareness, radical acceptance, beginner's mindset, and compassion to find new ways to move forward. So these are just some hints and like tips that what you could do in this kind of difficult situations. And this is what we will stop now. We thank you for listening, and we want to remind that well-being and mental health skills are human rights and of monumental importance of scientific excellence. And we also invite you to visit our website, the coachinginscience.org. We have launched it some time ago, and we will continue with the reflection. So there are some questions that take here in the room without the Zoom. So if somebody wants to share something, we can do that. If you are in Zoom, please take a screenshot or think about these things if you are watching alone or together with somebody, and we will take it from there. Yes, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop recording now.